Hey guys, tonight we step softly into the heart of the Forbidden City, through gates lacquered in vermilion, under eaves where dragons curl around beams like patient serpents. The air hums with the faint clang of distant bells, the shuffle of silk slippers, and the sigh of secrets. You're here as the light fades, just another servant among thousands, and the scent of sandalwood coils lazily in the dusk. Somewhere beyond the courtyards, the Son of Heaven exhales in his sleep, and you realize that every breath you take is a privilege. You probably won't survive this, at least not unchanged. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening from somewhere far away, let me know your city and your local time down below. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge across the jade-tiled courtyard, careful not to let your steps echo. Here, silence isn't empty, it's protocol. The first rule you learn as a palace eunuch is that your voice is less valuable than your composure. Even the faintest cough in the emperor's presence could summon the whip. Still, there's beauty in the order. The courtyards align with cosmic geometry, the north-south axis mirroring heaven and earth, the gold rooftops gleaming with 9,999.5 rooms, just shy of divine perfection. The architects were nothing if not humble before the gods, even as they built a home for one. You arrive at the gate of supreme harmony, where the marble lions guard the threshold. The male lion clutches a ball beneath his paw, the female a cub. You can't help noticing the irony, symbols of fertility flanking a eunuch's daily path. A guard eyes you but says nothing. You lower your head as etiquette demands, pretending not to see him. Inside, the court hums like a beehive under velvet. Eunuchs sweep, polish, whisper. Their movements are rehearsed down to the angle of an elbow. If you're going to survive here, you'll have to learn how to float rather than walk, how to bow without breaking your spine. Every gesture is codified. 3 steps, pause, turn, lower the head just so. Too deep and you mock humility. Too shallow and you risk treason. A mainstream fact drifts to mind. During the Ming Dynasty, there were over 70,000 eunuchs employed in imperial service. 70,000, enough to staff a small city, one entirely run by those who had surrendered their lineage for power. And it's not just China. Even the Byzantine Empire had eunuch officials, though none reached the same scale or intricacy of etiquette as those here beneath the golden tiles. You pass a scribe copying edicts on silk scrolls. His brush glides in strokes so measured they could lull the emperor himself to sleep. Ink, paper, posture, all disciplined by centuries of repetition. You notice his sleeves perfumed faintly with chrysanthemum oil, not vanity, but protocol. The imperial nose must never encounter human odor. You wonder how anyone has ever dared sneeze in the emperor's presence. Probably once. Only once. A fringe tidbit you overheard from an older eunuch makes you smile. Apparently, some of the Forbidden City's inner gates were opened or closed based on the emperor's mood. If he was irritable, the gate of heavenly purity stayed shut and everyone knew to tread lightly. The architecture itself became a barometer of royal temperament, an emotional weather system rendered in wood and gold. Historians still argue whether eunuchs are truly the emperor's loyal servants or merely his prisoners. You watch an old man bowing so low his forehead brushes the floor, and you think, maybe both. To serve here is to live in paradox, powerless yet near absolute power, invisible yet omnipresent. You make your way past the hall of mental cultivation, the emperor's private quarters. No one speaks above a whisper here. Even the sparrows seem to chirp more politely. The eunuch at the threshold performs a perfect half bow, signaling that his majesty is resting. You mirror it instinctively. The air smells faintly of ink and jasmine. One joke slips in your mind. If silence were a competition, the palace would win gold every dynasty. You almost laugh, but stop yourself. Humor, like ambition, is dangerous currency here. Deeper in the compound, you pass the laundry bureau, where silks from the emperor's robes are washed with water drawn only from specific wells, blessed by ritual. You think about how absurdly fragile privilege can be. One splash of ink, one crease in a robe, and a servant could vanish overnight. The palace runs on invisible rules, most of which you'll learn only by breaking them. You glimpse a small group of eunuchs kneeling beside the path, practicing their bows in unison. Their supervisor taps a bamboo stick rhythmically on the stone. Down, hold, rise, pivot. You can feel their desperation to perfect the choreography. Every movement is both worship and armor. It's said the emperor rarely walked outside without an entourage of eunuchs surrounding him like petals around a flower. Their task wasn't just service, it was performance. They embodied serenity so that the emperor could believe the world was orderly. The reality outside the walls, famines, wars, rebellions, didn't matter here. You pause near a bronze incense burner shaped like a phoenix. Smoke coils upward, catching the light like ghostly silk. You realize the eunuchs are not merely attendants, they're part of the palace's architecture, living ornaments who complete the illusion of divinity. Without them, the empire would lose its rhythm. But what about after hours, when the halls go dark? The eunuchs still move, polishing jade seals, folding the emperor's night robes, checking the palace clocks. Time here doesn't belong to the sun, but to duty. The day ends only when the emperor sleeps, and even then the night watch listens for his breathing. You imagine standing by his door, hearing the faint rustle of bedding, the exhale of a dod made flesh. How strange that proximity to such power can feel so utterly hollow. You're close enough to touch the fabric of heaven, yet your hands are never your own. One of the senior eunuchs, an ancient man whose eyelids droop like silk fans, passes you a word of advice. Walk as if the ground could remember you. You nod, not quite understanding, until you realize that every slab of stone in this place has absorbed centuries of footsteps, gossip, and fear. You can almost hear echoes beneath your soles. As the moon rises, the palace shimmers in ghostly quiet. Lanterns blink and rose, each one reflecting on polished marble like a duplicate world. Somewhere a night cricket chirps, bravely, stupidly. You smile again, at least someone here can speak freely. You kneel to refill an oil lamp, hands trembling slightly. The flame catches, flickers, steadies. For a moment, the reflected light dances across the lacquered walls, and you glimpse your face. Calm, obedient, unreadable. You're learning fast. Tomorrow you'll rise before dawn to attend a ritual where the emperor's breakfast porridge is tested for poison by 3 different eunuchs before it reaches his bowl. You'll stand in perfect silence while the Son of Heaven eats, and if a single fly dares to land, you'll be expected to catch it midair with a sleeve. There's no applause here, no reward, only continued existence. Yet, beneath the layers of obedience, a strange pride begins to bloom. You're part of something immense, something ancient, something that will outlive your body. The silken gates have closed behind you, and in their hush, you hear your new identity being written. Servant, shadow, survivor.
You wake before the sky does. The palace lies in a cool hush, that soft moment before dawn when everything feels suspended. You pull on your robe, plain, washed with rice water, no fragrance yet, and step into the courtyard where the mist sits low like spilled milk. There's a faint sound from the western compound, the clatter of a wooden bucket, a muffled groan, the echo of something human and terrible. You already know what it is, but you don't want to look. That's the sound of the blade and the bargain. No one speaks of it openly, but every eunuch in the Forbidden City carries the ghost of that day. The cutting, the transformation, the offering of flesh for service. You were once a boy from a village where opportunity ended at the rice field. Now you stand within walls built by emperors, your voice soft and your future decided by a knife. They say the procedure changed across centuries, some done by skilled surgeons under supervision, others, particularly during the Ming Dynasty, by dubious specialists known as bagong, who operated in back alleys with reed knives and prayer beads. The success rate wasn't stellar. Infection, blood loss, and shock claimed many before they even saw the city gates.
But for those who lived, a strange kind of immortality waited. You shuffled toward the kitchens, passing a young recruit wrapped in linen, pale as rice paper. He clutches a small jar to his chest. You know what's inside without asking. The removed parts were often preserved in vinegar and sealed in a jar, a grim token euphemistically called the precious treasure. Some buried it beneath ancestral altars, believing they could be whole again in the afterlife. Others stored it safely in the hope that, when they died, it would be placed back with them for reincarnation's sake. A grim superstition, perhaps, but not without tenderness. It's the sort of logic the palace breathes. If you can't reclaim your life, at least control your death. Historians still argue whether the castration process was primarily a punishment or a career move. For some, it was forced. Criminals and prisoners made eunuchs as penance. For others, it was voluntary, even strategic. After all, eunuchs could rise higher than most officials, wielding immense power with a smile and a bow. It's easy, from a distance, to scoff at such ambition, but when poverty crushes every dream, even a knife can look like salvation. You've heard the stories whispered in the laundry quarters. One boy so determined to join the court that he castrated himself at 13, wrapped the wound in lotus leaves, and walked 200 miles to Beijing. He fainted at the palace gate, but survived, and years later became head of the Imperial Wardrobe Department. People say he never limped. You wonder whether courage and madness are simply siblings under different lighting. As the first rays of sun creep over the tiled roofs, the kitchens burst alive. Steam billows from bronze cauldrons. Cooks mutter in a rhythmic precision. You ladle porridge into bowls, moving mechanically, trying not to picture that boy clutching his jar. The smell of millet and ginger fills the air, thick enough to chase away thought. An older eunuch beside you, his face lined like parchment, hums an old folk tune from his village. You ask, quietly, how long he served. He says, "Since the Jai Ming Emperor was a child. I was cut before my voice broke." He grins, a flash of gold tooth. "Saved me from singing off key." There's your joke for the hour. You manage a small laugh, grateful for the levity. The palace doesn't forbid humor, it simply hides it, like contraband spice. You carry trays toward the inner court, balancing porcelain bowls as delicately as if they were glass hearts. The eunuchs ahead of you move in silent procession, robes brushing marble. Somewhere above, a cuckoo calls, an accidental soundtrack to the ritual of service. The emperor's breakfast ceremony is a symphony of choreography. The tester eunuchs sample each dish in order, first the soup, then the rice, then the side of salted duck egg. Only after a 3-minute wait, when no one keels over, does the next servant step forward. Your task is small but crucial, refilling the emperor's teacup at precisely 2/3 full, no more, no less. Any deviation, and the head eunuch's bamboo rod will remind you of precision. Still, compared to the blade, the rod is mercy. As you stand in the shadowed corner of the hall, your mind drifts back to the strange bureaucracies that governed eunuch life. Every newly castrated servant was required to register at the Eunuch Control Bureau, where officials recorded name, age, and the oddest detail, the measurements of the missing parts, a grotesque form of identity. You think of it like the palace's earliest biometric record, though with considerably more vinegar. A quirky tidbit, some eunuchs claimed their voices could charm ghosts. Because their pitch sat between masculine and feminine, they were often invited to chant during funeral rites or purification rituals. One legend says the spirits listened more attentively to those between worlds. You try humming as you work, wondering if the spirits approve of your tune. Later that day, you attend a briefing in the servants' hall. The senior eunuch, a man known for his temper and his magnificent fan collection, lectures on discipline. He says, "Remember, the emperor does not see you as men.
You are extensions of the palace itself. Walls with eyes, curtains with hands. The empire breathes through you, but never for you. It sounds poetic until you realize it's literal. Eunuchs are the infrastructure of obedience. The emperor sleeps soundly because you surrendered the part of yourself that dreams. After the meeting, a younger eunuch asks you, "Do you ever miss it?" He doesn't mean love or lineage, he means the phantom of what was taken. You answer truthfully, "Sometimes, mostly when the moon is full. There's something about roundness that reminds you of completeness." You pass through the courtyards as dusk paints the sky violet. The city beyond the walls feels like a different planet, pulsing with laughter, women, and ordinary hungers. You wonder how it feels to want without guilt. The emperor can have anything, wine, concubines, armies, and yet rumor says he often confides only in his eunuchs. Power makes a lonely cage. You can't decide whether that comforts you or terrifies you. As you head toward your quarters, you hear a commotion near the eastern gate. Two eunuchs arguing, loud enough to break the spell of etiquette. One accuses the other of stealing sandalwood from the temple storeroom. You watch the head eunuch approach, serene as a cat. He doesn't raise his voice, he simply gestures, and the guards drag the offender away. The silence that follows is heavier than punishment itself. You return to your bunk, bare wood, one thin quilt, and lie staring at the ceiling beams. Somewhere in the dark, another servant mutters a prayer to Guanyin, goddess of mercy. You whisper along even though mercy here feels more rumor than reality. You remember the superstition about jars. Yours was buried near your old village, beside a mulberry tree. Sometimes you imagine roots wrapping gently around it, like hands holding something fragile. The thought comforts you. Maybe the earth is kinder than men. Before sleep takes you, your mind drifts to an odd question. If the body defines neither your worth nor your will, what are you now? Less than a man, or something freer? Historians still argue whether eunuchs sought enlightenment through detachment or were simply forced into it. You smile at the irony. Perhaps the difference doesn't matter. In the end, every servant here is learning the same art, how to disappear gracefully while remaining indispensable. You exhale. The palace exhales with you, its breath cool and eternal. The blade may have taken your body, but it also gave you this: entry into a world where silence has power, and obedience, strangely, becomes its own form of resistance. Morning sunlight glides down the lacquered pillars like warm honey, catching the dust motes that dance in air perfumed with sandalwood and starch. You rise, stretch your arms beneath the cotton sleeves of your robe, and prepare for another performance, the daily art of grooming, that silent theater of beauty where every hair, every scent, every fold of fabric matters. The courtyard fountain gurgles softly. A servant girl from the outer court sets a basin before you. Its surface trembles, mirroring the inverted sky. You dip your hands into the cool water, splash your face, and watch the ripples erase your reflection. You've learned that's the first rule of survival here: reflections can betray you. Today's duties begin not with scrolls or errands, but with appearances. Powdered faces and perfumed sleeves, the etiquette of presentation that transforms eunuchs into living ornaments of the palace. The emperor's peace depends on order, and order begins with scent. You dab crushed jasmine petals into your palms, rubbing until the oil warms against your skin. Even the aroma must be balanced, neither too sweet nor too sharp, lest the imperial nose twitch. The fragrance is mixed by a specialist eunuch called a xianggong, literally scent master, who knows the emperor's moods like a physician knows pulse. If His Majesty dreams of spring rain, sandalwood and chrysanthemum dominate. If his health falters, musk and camphor prevail.
A mainstream historical fact drifts through your thoughts. During the Ming and Qing dynasties, eunuchs oversaw entire departments devoted solely to fragrances and textiles. The Imperial Household Department employed perfumers, tailors, and even sleeve fresheners, small teams responsible for ensuring that every robe, glove, and curtain carried the right scent for each season. You once joked silently to yourself that the palace probably smelled better than paradise, assuming paradise could afford a cleaning staff of 3,000. You tie your sash with careful precision. One knot, centered just below the navel, not to the side. Side knots signify grief. And grief, like laughter, is bad form before sunrise. Your mirror is a polished bronze disc, its surface dim and distorted, but that's fine. True beauty here lies not in the face, but in restraint. As you smooth your robe, you notice the faint powder clinging to your wrists, rice flour mixed with pearl dust. It gives your skin a porcelain hue, softening every shadow. A fringe tidbit: eunuchs were known to use lead-based powders to achieve ghostly pallor, sometimes at the cost of their own health. Their skin glowed like moonlight, but beneath the paint, their bones whispered rebellion. You, thankfully, have the cheaper version. Rice flour doesn't kill as fast. The senior eunuch enters, fan snapping open like a verdict. "The emperor rises early," he announces. "Prepare the attendants of the morning toilette." You fall into step behind him, the scent of ambergris following like a rumor. You enter the hall of heavenly purity, just as the emperor's chamber doors open. Light floods the space in disciplined beams, revealing the emperor seated before a lacquered vanity. He doesn't glance at you. No one expects him to. The ritual begins. One eunuch offers warm water and a jade bowl, another presents embroidered towels, another lays out the cosmetics box carved from sandalwood. Each movement flows into the next like a dance choreographed by centuries. You approach when summoned, carrying the sleeve sachets, tiny silk pouches filled with aromatic herbs. You slip one discreetly into the emperor's sleeve, careful not to touch his skin. A misplaced brush could mean banishment. The sachet's blend today is symbolic: mint for alertness, chrysanthemum for calm, clove for protection. You've learned that even perfume here is political. Historians still argue whether the eunuch's obsession with grooming stemmed from genuine devotion or a deeper insecurity, a need to prove worth through elegance. You suspect both are true. In a palace where masculinity is outlawed, refinement becomes rebellion. You can't grow a beard, but you can outshine every scholar in the art of stillness. When the emperor departs for morning court, the servants exhale as one. You follow the others to the side chamber to replenish oils, powders, and the most precious item of all, lip rouge. Not for the emperor, of course, but for his concubines. Still, eunuchs handle the pigments. The irony isn't lost on you. The color of seduction measured, prepared, and applied by those denied desire. You linger near the cosmetics chest, fingers brushing the delicate brushes made of weasel hair. Their handles are painted red with gold lotus motifs. Someone once told you that these tools outlived their owners. After death, they were washed in wine and stored for future use. Nothing in this palace ever truly dies. It just gets reassigned. A colleague beside you giggles quietly. He's a wiry man from Suzhou with eyes like black pearls. "Did you hear," he whispers, "that the imperial concubine complained her powder made her sneeze? They say His Majesty's pillow now smells of pepper." You stifle a laugh. Humor here travels in the form of accidents. Later, as you tidy the perfume storeroom, you pass rows of ceramic jars labeled in elegant brushwork. Plum blossom essence, lotus dew, tears of amber. You read the names like poetry. Each fragrance has a personality, a rank, even a seasonal etiquette. Autumn perfumes must include resin, Winter blends prefer pine. You've memorized the hierarchy the way others memorize scripture. And then, amid all this delicate ritual, the palace allows one absurd indulgence. On festival days, eunuchs dust their robes with gold powder, subtle, barely visible, but enough to glint under lantern light. I love those nights. The gold doesn't make you powerful, but it reminds you that even servants can shimmer. You finish your duties and step outside into the crisp air. The courtyard smells faintly of incense and polished jade. You catch your reflection again in the pond, pale and powdered, lips tinted from handling rouge jars. You look neither male nor female, something other, a creature sculpted by duty and desire's absence. You think of yourself as porcelain animated by obedience. The palace cats stalk across the stones, tails flicking. They ignore you, of course. Everyone does unless they need something. You crouch and whisper, "At least you don't have to wear powder." The cat flicks its ear in agreement, then trots off toward the kitchens.
The next morning arrives like a secret, slipping under a locked door. The sun creeps shyly over the crimson rooftops, gilding the air with gold dust. You're already awake, because no one in the inner court dares to sleep through dawn. Today, you'll learn the etiquette of whispers, the invisible art that truly governs the Forbidden City. Whispers behind the dragon throne. That's what everyone calls it. It's not just gossip, it's survival. In a world where silence is mandatory, information becomes the only currency that buys safety. You're assigned to the Hall of Mental Cultivation again, where the Emperor holds private meetings. The hall is deceptively calm. Jade screens carved with phoenixes, incense swirling like delicate ghosts. But beneath that stillness hums an invisible battlefield. Eunuchs drift like shadows between courtiers, gathering fragments of conversation the way bees gather pollen. The head clerk, a gaunt man named Liu Jin, is already there. He was one of the infamous 8 Tigers, those eunuch officials who once controlled half the empire during the Zhongdu emperor's reign. People still speak his name with a mix of awe and dread. Today he's older, his spine bowed, but his voice sharp as a whetted blade. "You'll learn," he tells you, fanning himself lazily, "that power doesn't sit on the throne. It hides behind it, and we are its furniture." He chuckles, a sound like paper tearing. Historians still argue whether eunuchs like Liu Jin were villains or visionaries. Some say they were parasites who drained the empire's treasury. Others claim they were pragmatic administrators who kept the state functioning when ministers quarreled. You suspect the truth, as usual, floats somewhere between ink and rumor. Your task today is to serve tea to the visiting ministers. Simple, right? Except that tea service is never simple here. The angle of your wrist as you pour, the order in which you serve each official, even the direction you turn afterward, all communicate allegiance. Pour clockwise, and you honor the emperor. Pour counterclockwise, and someone will accuse you of plotting rebellion by lunchtime. You steady your hand. The tray trembles only slightly, betraying the pulse beneath your sleeve. You can feel the eyes of the entire court watching, not because they care about tea, but because they're trained to notice weakness. You pour for the emperor first, of course. His gaze flicks to you just long enough for your lungs to forget how to function. Then, with mechanical grace, you move to the ministers. The silence is thick, broken only by the faint hiss of steam. As you step back, one of the officials murmurs something under his breath. You catch a fragment. "The eunuchs have too much influence." The words slide into your ear like a splinter. You keep your expression neutral, but you know better than to forget. Later, when the ministers leave, Liu Jin calls you aside. "You heard that, didn't you?" he asks. You nod. He smiles faintly. "Good. Then you've taken your first step towards usefulness." That's how it begins. Whispers become your trade. You learn to listen without appearing to. You discover that walls in this palace don't just echo, they gossip. The wind through the lattice windows carries secrets, and you learn which servants to trust, which to bribe, which to avoid entirely. One quirky tidbit floats through the inner circles. The emperor sometimes tested his eunuchs' loyalty by releasing false rumors. Those who repeated them were punished, those who stayed silent were rewarded. You can't tell if it's true, but the idea makes your pulse quicken every time you hear a confidential story. Your training intensifies. You practice walking silently across stone corridors, holding your breath for entire minutes while waiting behind screens. You study the art of facial neutrality, how to absorb a scandal without blinking. Liu Jin once told you, your eyes must learn to hear. You thought it was poetic nonsense until you realized it's literal advice. The slightest flicker in someone's gaze can reveal an entire plot. By night, the Forbidden City transforms into a living ear. Lanterns flicker low, and shadows lengthen across the walls like ink spreading through water. Eunuchs carry sealed documents between halls, some genuine, some forged. You're sometimes asked to deliver a scroll without reading it, yet curiosity gnaws at you. You've peeked once or twice, just a corner, enough to glimpse the real machinery of the empire. Names crossed out, orders reversed, fates sealed with vermilion ink. One night, you overhear 2 guards whispering about a concubine rumored to be pregnant with an heir. It's forbidden gossip, dangerous and irresistible. You file it away in your mind, unsure whether it's truth or bait. Days later, the concubine disappears from the court entirely. No announcement, no mourning. Her chamber is reassigned within a week. You stop sleeping for 3 nights after that. You begin to notice small patterns, which eunuchs walk faster after a conversation, which ministers lower their heads too deeply, which doors are opened by night but closed by day. Each clue becomes part of your mental map, the secret topography of survival. One morning, while preparing incense for the emperor's meditation, you notice a folded note tucked beneath the burner. The handwriting is precise, unfamiliar. It reads, "The tiger is restless. Feed it silence." You freeze. It's either a metaphor, or a trap, or both. You burn the note immediately, but its meaning lingers. Perhaps it refers to the emperor himself, or perhaps to Liu Jin. Humor becomes your only release. At dinner, another eunuch jokes, "If walls have ears, do floors have opinions?" The morning bells toll 3 slow chimes, deep and resonant, like the heartbeat of the palace itself. You rise before they fade, sliding from your cot with the weary grace of routine. The silk robe waits folded at your bedside, crimson trim for attendants of the imperial household, plain for those like you who serve in proximity but not yet favor. You smooth it over your knees, thinking, not for the first time, that the robe fits like a promise you can never quite fulfill. Today, you're scheduled for Gongshi, the service theater, a title that sounds elegant until you realize it's literal. Every gesture in the Forbidden City is a performance. You must serve not food but illusion, not letters but choreography. Every spoon, every bow, every movement is a scene in an endless imperial play where the audience is one man and his approval sustains the world. You step into the corridor where morning mist clings to the tiles, softening the outlines of the eaves. The other eunuchs move in silent procession, faces powdered, eyes downcast, their bodies flowing in perfect rhythm. It looks peaceful, but you know better. It's the peace of rehearsed obedience, not serenity. In the hall of imperial nourishment, the head eunuch barks quiet orders. Remember your sequence, no hesitation. The emperor notices hesitation. He paces like a conductor before a nervous orchestra. The tables are already laid with porcelain as thin as frost, bowls painted with cloud motifs, spoons shaped like lotuses. Even the chopsticks are arranged according to rank, the emperor's tipped with gold, his mother's with jade, everyone else's with humility. You take your place near the incense brazier, where smoke curls like stage mist. Your task? Assist with the ceremonial breakfast. It's called Sheng Cha, but really, it's a symphony of manners. One eunuch carries the tray of dishes, another fans the emperor's hand as he eats, another kneels ready to wipe any accidental spill before gravity even finishes its work. You'll present the final cup of tea, the closing act of this daily performance. A mainstream historical fact crosses your mind as you prepare. Imperial dining could last hours, involving dozens of small symbolic dishes. In the Qing dynasty, records list up to 108 items for a single banquet, though the emperor rarely tasted more than 10. Each dish signified cosmic harmony: duck for balance, lotus root for purity, sea cucumber for resilience. The eunuchs, of course, memorized every combination. Forget the order, and you could end up scrubbing latrines instead of polishing jade. You enter the hall. It's all shimmering silence. The emperor in his golden robe, his eyes heavy with thought. The courtiers arranged like chess pieces, the air dense with expectation. You bow low enough that your forehead grazes the polished floor. The scent of ginger and sesame hovers like prayer. The emperor lifts his chopsticks, gestures slightly, and the entire room exhales. The performance begins. You watch as attendants move in graceful synchrony, lifting lids, replacing dishes, refilling cups. The emperor doesn't look at them. He doesn't have to. He can feel their precision like an invisible halo. When your moment comes, you glide forward, balancing the teacup in both hands. Your eyes stay fixed on the emperor's chest, never his face. You kneel, extend your arms, and wait for the faintest nod. Only then do you rise and retreat 3 steps, always backward, always silent. It's absurdly intricate, but also strangely beautiful, the way dozens of bodies move to sustain one man's stillness. You think, fleetingly, that the palace runs less on politics than on choreography. Historians still argue whether this elaborate etiquette was designed to honor the emperor or to restrain him, to cocoon him so deeply in ritual that he could no longer act freely. You suspect it's both. The palace isn't just a home, it's a cage lined with gold. You glance at the emperor's reflection in a polished urn. His expression is unreadable, but you notice his fingers tapping a rhythm on the table. Is he bored, angry, or simply alive in his own world of rules? You'll never know. The emperor's moods are weather patterns, felt, never forecast. As the meal ends, eunuchs clear the table with seamless precision. No words, only glances. The head eunuch signals the conclusion with a flick of his fan. You bow once more, your knees whispering against the floor. Outside, the tension dissolves like steam. Someone lets out a shaky laugh, another wipes sweat from his brow. "He nodded," one whispers triumphantly, as if witnessing sunrise. You smile faintly. In this palace, a nod can be a blessing or a reprieve from annihilation. Later that day, you're assigned to the archive hall, where the emperor's edicts are stored. The transition feels like stepping from theater into library, stillness of a different sort. Your role? Deliver documents between scribes. Even here, the choreography continues. The scroll held at a precise angle, unfurled only upon command, sealed with vermilion ink that smells faintly of cinnabar and secrecy. A colleague named Bao whispers as you work. Do you know that the emperor's favorite food tester once bowed too low and spilled soup on His Majesty's slipper? You wince. What happened? Bao shrugs. They say he now oversees the palace pigsty. You chuckle softly. At least he stayed in service. Your laughter earns a glare from the archivist, who snaps, "Silence is the palace's most ancient law." You nod obediently, though you can't resist muttering under your breath, "And it's least obeyed." The archivist pretends not to hear. You spend the afternoon delivering scrolls, your footsteps absorbed by stone. You start to realize the entire court is a theater without intermission. Even the shadows have choreography: when to move, when to freeze, when to vanish. Near sunset, a commotion stirs near the Hall of Supreme Harmony. You hurry to see a line of eunuchs rehearsing for tomorrow's ceremony. It's the emperor's birthday banquet, which means hundreds of guests and 1,000 opportunities for disaster. You're to assist in the presentation of gifts. The rehearsal feels endless. One eunuch missteps during the bow, and the instructor whacks him lightly on the shoulder with a bamboo rod. Precision is reverence. Reverence is survival. You repeat it silently, committing it to the same corner of your mind that holds your old village prayers. A fringe tidbit circulates as you practice. The emperor once dismissed an entire serving team because one of them sneezed during the meal. It sounds absurd until you remember that in this world, even air must obey decorum. Night descends. The palace lights up with lanterns shaped like lotuses, their glow reflected on marble courtyards. You sit on the steps, letting the fatigue seep out of your bones. A younger eunuch joins you, yawning. "Sometimes I think we're actors who forgot the play. Do you ever wonder what happens when the curtain finally falls?" You shrug. "Maybe we keep bowing until someone turns off the lights." He laughs, and for a fleeting second, you both exist beyond hierarchy. Two voices in the dark, unscripted. Before bed, you polish the ceremonial teapot one last time. Its surface gleams, distorted reflections dancing in gold. You see your own face, unlined yet weary, obedient yet quietly proud. You've learned the hardest trick of all: how to move through grandeur without becoming invisible to yourself. And as you lie down, the echo of the day's performance lulls you to sleep. The clink of porcelain, the rustle of robes, the faint whisper of bows folding into silence. You realize that the palace isn't a prison of walls, it's a prison of posture. But if you bow gracefully enough, perhaps it begins to feel like flight.
Dawn again, but this time it feels different, quieter, more calculated. You move through the corridors with a tray of documents, not tea. The faint smell of ink replaces that of jasmine. Instead of curtsying before appetites, you now serve the hunger for power. Welcome to the palace's mind, its bureaucratic heart, where words rule more absolutely than swords. The air here hums differently. You hear the gentle rasp of brushes over silk paper, the soft clink of jade seals, the murmurs of scribes correcting each other's brushstrokes. The Hall of Records feels endless, filled with neat rows of bamboo chests that hold the empire's pulse. You glide between them, holding a scroll as though it were a newborn. You've learned that one misfiled edict can rewrite a nobleman's fate, or erase a name from history altogether. Today, your task is to assist in the copying of memorials submitted to the emperor. You're told to sit quietly, but of course, your ears wander. The scribes debate which words will please the dragon throne. Should we write humble supplication or earnest devotion? Someone mutters. One wrong phrase and an official might find his head lighter by morning. You smile faintly. Bureaucracy as blood sport. A mainstream historical fact flits into your thoughts. During the Ming Dynasty, the eunuchs of the Imperial Secretariat became de facto administrators of the realm. They handled petitions, recorded decrees, even supervised the ministries. Their leader, the Director of Ceremonial Affairs, could overrule entire departments of scholar officials. It was the age of the inner court, when those without lineage, but with access to the emperor, could bend the empire's machinery to their touch. Of course, that kind of power required a delicate etiquette of its own. You weren't just a scribe, you were a ghost in the machinery, a whisper in the archives. You're summoned to deliver a sealed edict to the Office of Grain Tax. The corridor there smells of dust and faint mildew, records piled so high they nearly brush the carved beams. You find yourself wondering how many secrets these scrolls hide. Somewhere among them might be the emperor's private letters or confessions never meant for daylight. As you hand over the edict, an older eunuch with silvered eyebrows gives you a sly look. "Be careful," he says. "Those who carry the words of heaven sometimes forget their own." You nod, unsure whether he's warning or testing you. Later, you help compile the monthly ledger, a catalog of revenues from rice, silk, salt, and tea. The numbers shimmer before your eyes, endless waves of inked characters. The palace runs on ceremony, yes, but also on arithmetic. Every candle lit in a concubine's chamber, every embroidered robe, every bowl of lotus soup, it all begins here, under a eunuch's brush. You pause to stretch your neck, and Bao, the same gossip from the archive, leans over. "Did you hear about the ink rebellion?" he whispers. You raise an eyebrow. "The what?" Bao grins. "A scribe once mixed too much lampblack into the ink for an edict. The emperor thought it looked funereal and accused him of cursing the throne." You stifle a laugh. "What happened to him?" "Transferred to manure records," Bao says cheerfully. "At least he kept working with natural materials." You try to suppress your chuckle, but it escapes as a snort. Even in the most solemn places, absurdity blooms like mold. By midday, you're tasked with escorting a confidential report to the Grand Chamberlain himself. You've never been this close to such a man before. His title alone causes others to lower their eyes. His office is austere. A single jade brush rest, a small brazier, and shelves lined with secret histories. He motions you forward. "Read this," he says without looking up. "It's a report on corruption among border garrisons. The names are familiar. Officials who bow low at banquets, but steal grain from starving soldiers. You will deliver this directly to His Majesty, but you will not speak of it to anyone, even if your tongue burns." You nod, unsure whether he's warning or testing you. On your way back through the maze of corridors, you pass a room where eunuchs are testing seal impressions. You pause to watch. The red wax glistens like molten sunsets, each imprint perfectly identical. One of them notices you and says, "Did you know some eunuchs carved fake seals?" Historians still argue whether those forgeries were treason or just desperate art. You imagine someone etching power into wax, trembling between loyalty and survival. You understand the impulse too well. You deliver the report to the emperor's study. He doesn't look up as you bow. "Leave it there," he says softly, his voice distant but heavy. The silence afterward feels like a thunderclap. You retreat slowly, each step echoing against centuries of obedience. Back in the records hall, evening falls. The scribes begin to yawn, their brushes slowing. You help extinguish the oil lamps, one by one. The smell of ink lingers on your hands, sharp, metallic, a little like blood. Bao joins you by the window, watching the sunset smear the sky in gold and rust. He says, "Strange, isn't it? We control the Empire's memory, but no one will remember us." You nod. "We're ghosts with good handwriting." He laughs, but it's hollow. You both know the truth. Eunuchs were indispensable, yet disposable. Their labor shaping history while their names evaporated from it. The Empire was built on anonymity, polished to perfection. As night thickens, you lock the archives. The great doors close with a resonant funk that feels like the world exhaling. You lean against the frame, letting fatigue settle in. A fringe tidbit drifts through your thoughts before sleep. Some eunuchs were buried with their writing brushes placed in their hands, as if ready to keep recording in the afterlife. You picture that. The quiet scholar under the earth, still taking dictation for emperors of dust. You wonder, as the moonlight pools across the courtyard, whether the ink on your fingers is more permanent than flesh. Maybe this is your peculiar eternity, not to be remembered, but to have recorded the memories of others so precisely that the world keeps turning, unaware of your invisible touch. And as you drift toward sleep, the rustle of scrolls becomes the soft lullaby of power itself, the whisper that the hand holding the brush, even if it trembles, rules longer than a sword.
Night drips down the palace walls like old ink. The lamps have gone dim, the courtyard's fallen silent. You walk through the labyrinth of servants' quarters, where laughter is forbidden, but whispers thrive like weeds in cracked stone. This is the part of the forbidden city no emperor visits, the chambers of those who serve, love, and mourn in secret. Your room is narrow, lined with bamboo mats and a single paper lantern. On the wall hangs a fan painted with cranes, a gift from an older eunuch now gone. Beneath your pillow, folded carefully, lies your most private treasure, a tiny paper doll dressed in court robes. Her eyes are ink dots, her smile faint, and her hair drawn into delicate loops. She is your companion, your confession, and the closest thing you have to tenderness. Love, in the life of a eunuch, becomes a matter of imagination. You can't chase it, so you invent it. You build it out of silence, gestures, and sometimes paper. You sit on the floor and stare at the doll for a long time. Her paper fingers flutter in the draft like she wants to wave. "You'd laugh at me," you whisper, "if you could speak." A soft knock at your door startles you. It's Bao, the one with the endless stories. He looks tired tonight. "The palace feels heavy," he says, stepping in. "They say the emperor's new concubine fainted during her morning greeting. Too much powder, not enough breath." You both laugh quietly, palace humor, brittle and necessary. He glances at the doll on your mat. "Paper wife?" he teases. You blush. "She's a reminder." Bao nods. "Of what?" "Of softness," you say, surprising yourself with the word. You share a small flask of plum wine, contraband, of course, though watered down enough to be harmless.
The warmth travels through your throat like nostalgia. Bao leans back, eyes half closed. Sometimes I think that the emperor's concubines are freer than we are. At least they can dream of sons. You don't answer. You've stopped dreaming of lineage long ago. Your kind leaves no descendants, only traces, handwriting, old robes, the faint scent of sandalwood in corridors no one remembers. A mainstream historical fact surfaces in your mind, uninvited. Some eunuchs in the Ming and Qing courts adopted sons, usually servants or apprentices, to care for them in old age. They even passed down wealth and titles. Officially, it was forbidden. Unofficially, it was the only legacy left to men denied family. You look at Bao, who's half asleep now. Maybe, you think, you'll name him heir to your small collection of scrolls and secrets. You stifle a laugh at the thought, an inheritance of dust. After he leaves, the silence returns. You blow out the lantern and lie awake staring at the faint outlines of the rafters. Somewhere far off, you hear the sound of singing, a woman's voice, high and trembling from the direction of the concubines' quarters. You imagine her gazing through her window lattice, wondering if the stars beyond the palace walls still look the same as when she was free. You wonder the same thing. Historians still argue whether eunuchs experienced affection in the way others did, or if their emotional worlds became entirely ceremonial. You'd tell them this: affection doesn't vanish, it mutates. It hides in kindness, in laughter, in the act of folding a paper figure when no one is watching. The next day, your duties take you to the Department of Household Supplies. It's not glamorous, counting candles, registering laundry, but you find small poetry in the mundane. The scent of fresh linen, the rhythmic scribble of the record brush. A concubine servant passes by, her perfume lingering like a sigh. You close your eyes for a second longer than proper. Later, you deliver a bolt of silk to the embroidery chamber. The women there hum as they stitch dragons and phoenixes into fabric. You watch their hands move, graceful and sure, and feel something inside you ache, a ghost of touch, a memory your body refuses to forget. One of the embroiderers looks up and smiles faintly. "You hold the silk like it's alive," she says. You bow, flustered. "It feels alive," you reply. She laughs softly. "Maybe everything in the palace is, except us." You carry her words with you the rest of the day. That night, you join a few others in the courtyard behind the kitchens. Someone has smuggled in a pipa, and a thin, melancholy melody drifts through the dark. You close your eyes and let it wash over you. The stars blur above the tiled roofs, the night air cool against your neck. You realize this might be what love feels like now, being near warmth without asking for more. A fringe tidbit you once overheard surfaces. Some eunuchs in the late Ming and Qing courts kept small shrines to imagined wives. Paper effigies offered fruit, incense, even combs. The paper companions were believed to accompany them in the next life, whole and human again. You think of your own doll, her fragile smile, and feel oddly comforted. As weeks pass, you notice more of these quiet attachments among your peers. 2 eunuchs share a robe during the winter chill. Another spends his evenings painting flowers, whispering to them as if they were listening. Everyone invents someone to love. It's the only way to stay human in a place built to erase it. You begin writing small poems, nothing grand, just murmured confessions to yourself. The moon is a coin, tossed in the emperor's pond. We are the ripples, brief, trembling, unseen. You hide them inside bamboo tubes beneath your cot. Perhaps someone will find them centuries later and wonder who wrote them. Perhaps they'll think you were in love. Perhaps they'll be right. One morning, Bao teases you again. "Still writing those secret verses?" he asks. You grin. "Only when the palace forgets to breathe." He laughs, shaking his head. "If they ever catch you, say you're practicing imperial correspondence." You both know it's risky, but what isn't? Even love in this place must hide beneath bureaucracy. That night, before sleep, you unfold your paper wife again. Her edges are frayed now, her ink fading. You smooth her dress and whisper, "When I'm gone, maybe they'll burn you with me." The thought doesn't frighten you. In a world that forbids touch, the idea of someone or something waiting on the other side feels almost merciful. You drift into dreams filled with lantern light and soft laughter. Somewhere, a pipa still plays. The tune follows you down an endless corridor, past silk screens and moonlit pools, until you reach a door that finally opens, not to duty, but to warmth.
Morning breaks with the scent of steam and sesame. You wake to the clatter of bowls, the faint hiss of boiling water, and the unmistakable music of palace kitchens coming alive. Today, you've been reassigned to assist in the Imperial Culinary Bureau, an honor and a hazard. You've seen more people demoted for a misplaced dumpling than for leaking a secret decree. The kitchen is a realm unto itself, vast as a temple and just as hierarchical. The air trembles with spice and authority. At the far end, the chief of imperial provisions stands like a general surveying troops, his apron embroidered with tiny gold dragons. Beneath him, a dozen eunuchs and servants dart about, their movements crisp, efficient, rehearsed. Knives flash like silver fish, ladles dip into soups that shimmer like molten jade. The seasons shift quietly, as they always do in the Forbidden City. Autumn's crispness has turned to the brittle chill of winter. You can see your breath now as you walk through the northern corridors, the marble floors cold even through your boots. The palace feels quieter, as if the walls themselves are holding their breath. Something in the air has changed, an unease that even incense can't mask. Rumors ripple faster than servants can sweep the courtyards. The emperor is furious. Someone in the treasury has been caught embezzling silver. Fingers are being pointed, names whispered in corridors like curses. Eunuchs, you among them, find yourselves in a storm you didn't summon but can't escape. You and Bao exchange glances over a ledger one morning. They say director's son skimmed funds from the salt tax, he murmurs. They say he built himself a villa with a gold pond. You snort softly. They always say that. Maybe he just bought a warm blanket. But even as you joke, you can feel the fear tightening around you. The eunuch's power has grown too bright, too visible. And as history has shown, bright things in the imperial court are often the first to be extinguished. A mainstream historical fact hums through your memory. By the late Ming dynasty, eunuch corruption had become the scapegoat for imperial decline. Grand secretaries blamed them for draining the treasury. Officials accused them of manipulating the emperor's decrees. When the Cheng-Shing emperor took power, he ordered purges that wiped out entire eunuch departments overnight. You remember reading that in a training scroll, and now it feels less like history and more like prophecy. The first arrests come at dusk. Guards in black armor storm through the eastern compound, dragging out trembling men in gray robes. You recognize one, Old Hay, the record-keeper who taught you to read palace seals. His eyes meet yours for a heartbeat before he's swallowed by the darkness. That night, the palace doesn't sleep. The sound of boots and chains echoes through the corridors, mingling with the winter wind. You lie awake, staring at the ceiling, each creak of the beams sounding like fate rearranging itself. By morning, the gossip is merciless. Bao finds you in the corridor, his face pale. They say son confessed, said the corruption ran all the way down. They'll question everyone. You swallow hard. Question or blame? He doesn't answer. Later, you're summoned to the Hall of Internal Affairs. The officials waiting there look like vultures dressed in silk, stern faces, eyes sharp as needles. They ask you questions that sound innocent until you realize each one is a trap. How long have you worked under Director Sun? Who signed the last grain inventory? Do you enjoy your privileges here? You answer carefully, like threading a needle in the dark. I serve faithfully. I obey orders. Privilege is only borrowed light. They scribble notes, faces unreadable. Historians still argue whether the fall of the eunuchs was inevitable or engineered, a convenient purge to distract from imperial decline. You can't help but think of it now, that power in this palace is less about what you hold than about who decides to look away. That night, the executions begin. Quiet ones at first, a few disappearances explained as transfers. Then louder ones, public, theatrical. The imperial courtyard fills with whispers and ash. You stay away from the crowds, your stomach turning at the smell of burnt incense masking something darker. Bao stops eating. His jokes fade. One evening you find him sitting by the koi pond staring into the frozen water. They took the chamberlain today, he says, flatly. They said he falsified tribute accounts. You sit beside him. Did he? Does it matter? You both fall silent. The koi swim sluggishly beneath the ice, flashes of orange in a gray world. A fringed tidbit surfaces from your memory. Some eunuchs believed that if they died unjustly, their spirits would haunt the palace until the emperor himself dreamed of them.
You glance at the reflection of the walls, endless and cold. Maybe the palace will never sleep again, you murmur. Weeks pass and the purges deepen. Departments close, scrolls vanish, eunuchs who once strutted now shuffle. Laughter dies, replaced by the soft rustle of prayer beads. The smell of fear is everywhere, sour, invisible, thick. You survive by becoming smaller. You bow deeper, speak softer, erase yourself from the room before anyone can remember your name. Bao calls it strategic invisibility. You call it breathing. Then one morning, without warning, you're ordered to accompany a delegation to the execution grounds. The emperor demands witnesses from every department. You don't argue. You just walk. The courtyard is vast, the sky colorless. A line of condemned eunuchs kneel before a wooden platform. The wind bites your face. You force yourself to watch. Some cry, others whisper prayers. One man stares straight ahead, lips moving soundlessly, as if reciting his own name so he won't forget it in death. When the first blade falls, you flinch. Not at the sound, but at the sudden silence afterwards, heavier than thunder. You think of all the years spent perfecting bows, rituals, documents, and how it all dissolves into a puff of breath on a winter morning. That night, you can't eat. You sit by the window staring at the city walls glowing faintly under moonlight. Bao sits beside you, his voice barely audible. They'll keep cutting until there's no one left to serve the tea. You manage a faint smile. Then maybe the emperor will pour his own. He chuckles once, then sighs. If that day comes, I'll believe in miracles. The next morning, Bao is gone. No one says where. His mat is rolled, his cup missing. You find only a single folded note under your door. When they ask, tell them I was loyal. You sit there for a long time, reading the line over and over until the ink smudges with your tears. By spring, the purges ease. New faces fill the halls, young, nervous, eager to serve. You train them in the etiquette of survival. Never speak first, never stand taller than silence, never forget that favor and ruin are separated by a breath. You still walk the same corridors, but the palace feels like a mausoleum now. Every sound echoes too long, as if haunted by memory. And yet, strangely, life continues. The emperor laughs again at banquets, the kitchens bustle, the scribes return to their ink. History resets itself, pretending the blood never touched its pages. You too resume your duties. But sometimes when you pass the koi pond, you swear you see Bao's reflection, smiling faintly as if to say he made it out in his own way. The palace doesn't notice. It never does. But you remember. You always will.
Spring again, but this time the blossoms look less like renewal and more like forgetting. Pink petals drift across the stone courtyards of the Forbidden City, settling in cracks like delicate secrets. You sweep them away each morning, a small ritual of silence. The purges have ended, the fear has receded, and the palace breathes again. But its breath feels different, hollow, shallow, a body that's survived too many winters. You've been promoted quietly, no fanfare, no scrolls. You now oversee the daily ceremonies of the inner court, the greetings, the processions, the endless bows that sustain an empire built on posture. You know every angle of obeisance, every rhythm of respect. You could choreograph loyalty in your sleep. The eunuchs who remain move like ghosts through well-polished halls. You can tell who lived through the purge, the way they flinch at sudden laughter, the way they scan doorways before speaking. Everyone's learned the same etiquette. Speak softly, remember everything, and never trust applause.
You spend your mornings at the Hall of Eternal Harmony, rehearsing court ceremonies for visiting envoys. Today's guest is from the Ryukyu Kingdom. You coach a nervous junior eunuch on the proper order of bows. First to the Emperor's shadow, then to his words, then to the space where his presence lingers. He nods earnestly, repeating it like a prayer. You smile, but it's a tired smile, the kind of smile you've worn for years. Later, you oversee a banquet rehearsal. Servants arranged porcelain dishes shaped like phoenix wings, gold-threaded banners ripple in the breeze, and the court musicians tune their zithers. The room gleams with order, every gesture rehearsed to the heartbeat of power. But in the quiet, before the emperor arrives, you allow yourself to breathe. You trace the rim of a wine cup, its surface cool and faintly cracked. You think of Bao, how he'd once joked that if eunuchs ever formed their own kingdom, it would be the cleanest, quietest, and most efficiently run realm in history. We'd bow to each other until the end of time, he'd said. You chuckle softly at the memory. A mainstream historical fact flickers through your mind. Under the Qing dynasty, eunuchs were eventually restricted to strictly ceremonial roles. Their power was clipped, their influence dissolved into ritual. Yet even in decline, their presence remained essential. No imperial morning could begin without a eunuch lighting the incense, announcing the dawn, and ensuring that the world still revolved around the throne's breath. As you supervise the ceremonial procession, you notice one scholar official watching you closely. His eyes carry that familiar disdain, the kind reserved for those of your kind. Later, as he passes, he mutters under his breath, "A servant playing priest." You let it slide. Etiquette, after all, isn't just for show, it's armor. "Someone has to keep heaven's schedule," you murmur just loud enough for him to hear. He stumbles slightly, unsure whether you've insulted him or blessed him. Historians still argue whether the eunuchs' endurance was tragedy or triumph. Some call them victims of cruelty, others architects of subtle revolutions. But here, within these vermilion walls, you know it's simpler. You endured because you had to. The empire needed someone to remember its heartbeat when others were too proud to listen. Night falls on another ceremony. Lanterns bloom across the courtyards, their light trembling in the wind. You stand at the edge of the Hall of Supreme Harmony, watching the emperor dine. His laughter carries faintly through the air, the same melody sung by countless rulers before him. The eunuchs hover around him like planets orbiting an ancient sun. You realize something. The palace itself is the true emperor. It consumes men and women alike, polishing them into ritual. And you, somehow, have become one of its caretakers. After the feast, you wander alone through the silent corridors. The moonlight paints the marble in soft silver. You pass the old stone bench where you and Bao once sat, whispering forbidden jokes about ministers and mooncakes. The bench is colder now, lonelier, but you can almost hear his laugh, a soft echo under the cicadas. A fringe tidbit drifts into your thoughts. Some late Qing eunuchs, forbidden from burial in family plots, built miniature shrines inside the palace walls. Tiny, secret altars hidden behind bricks or beneath staircases, places to whisper their names into eternity. You wonder if Bao made one for himself somewhere, a scrap of incense smoke curling upward through forgotten cracks. The night grows cooler. You wrap your robe tighter and continue walking, past closed gates and sleeping lions, until you reach the western courtyard. The stars above seem close enough to touch. For a moment, the air feels lighter, almost tender. You think of the centuries that came before and the centuries that will follow, all folding into one endless ceremony. You whisper softly to no one in particular, "We kept the empire running." No one answers. The only sound is the faint creak of bamboo in the wind. But you feel something shift, a small peace settling where fear used to live. Tomorrow you'll rise again before dawn, arrange the ceremonial lanterns, and teach the new attendants how to bow just right. The empire continues, and so do you. You smile faintly. After all, isn't that the peculiar etiquette of Imperial Eunuchs? To survive every season by bowing at precisely the right angle? And with that thought, you walk back through the moonlit court, your shadow long, steady, and silent.
The palace quiets. The oil lamps burn low and the night folds softly around you. You walk slower now, your footsteps echoing through the hollow courtyards like a lullaby no one remembers. The air smells faintly of sandalwood and spring dust. Every sound, your breath, the sigh of the trees, the gentle flicker of flame, feels drawn out, suspended, unhurried. You pause beneath the old magnolia tree, its petals drifting down like whispers. The moon hides behind a cloud, and for a moment, the world feels weightless. You think of the centuries of silence that have passed through these walls, of laughter, fear, ceremony, and the strange, stubborn tenderness of those who lived without names. Your fingers brush the rough stone wall of the courtyard. It's cold, but steady, like history itself. You can almost hear the echo of Bao's voice, faint and amused. "We kept the empire running, didn't we?" You smile, small and private. The wind carries away the sound, and slowly your breathing evens. The lanterns fade to embers. The palace drifts into sleep, vast and untroubled. Somewhere in that dream, your story folds itself neatly away, another quiet record in the archive of eternity. So, rest easy now. You've walked the corridors, carried the scrolls, survived the etiquette. The empire is safe for another night. The moon settles, the fan hums, and in the hush that follows, everything finally grows still.